I got this assignment from Meat Eater about urban bucks. And, I have some experience in that realm. I live in the Twin Cities, but everybody was like, you're the guy. And so we chatted, hit it up. I've got some quotes from you in there that were really, really good. And you've carved out a cool niche for yourself as a guy who's living in a place where we don't think about quality whitetail hunting. And really, I think to describe you, I'd say this is a dude who has made the most of kind of a weird hunting situation.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I live in the suburbs of Washington D.C. and I got tired of driving many, many hours to go hunt places that didn't have a lot of deer, and I kept, driving past 5, 6, 10 deer feeding in front lawns to go sit in the woods. And I don't know, eventually a light bulb went off when I was sitting in traffic. Why leave deer to find deer? And started hunting in the burbs and started shooting a lot of deer. I actually shot 4 deer on the first urban hunt that I had, and I was hooked, man. That was like the drug dealer handing out free drugs to me, because now I very rarely even go hunt in farm country or big woods. I do some, it's fun, but I enjoy kind of the dynamic aspect of hunting in the suburbs. So, although what's really interesting to me, so I hunt anywhere from 175 to 225 days a year. My season runs year round here. I'm very fortunate that I get to do a lot of hunting, but, it's amazing to me the parallels when I do go hunt farm country or big woods or somewhere in the Midwest. I mean, deer are deer, and you can really take what you learn in this little microcosm of the suburbs and apply it anywhere, because pressure's pressure, deer are deer. They're going to survive. They're going to do whatever they need to do to survive. And so there might be little differences between urban hunting and rural hunting, but ultimately the deer are the same. So it's been pretty cool to kind of go out and implement stuff that I use here in the suburbs on my little 1/4 acre pieces or 2 acre pieces or whatever the combination of properties are. When I go to like a 2,500 acre spot, it's the same thing. I'm narrowing down pockets and going after them.
Yeah, it's I know a lot of people listen to you talk and they're living in a place where they have, the family farm, or they have a bunch of good public land and big tracts to work with. And they're thinking like, no way in hell would I do that. But and I would have been that way before I moved to the Twin Cities. I would have said the same thing, like, no way in hell, right? Like I have no desire to do that. Then you end up in these life situations where you're going, okay, my job's here, my wife's here, whatever. Now I have to make the most of this. And when I moved to the Twin Cities and I live in the suburbs, I was miserable because I grew up in a place where I had smally rivers and trout streams and places to hunt turkeys and deer and pheasants and everything. And then I ended up in a place where I'm like, I can't find a place to hunt that's not public. And I'm walking into these places going, there's so much people sign here. It sucks. But what it did for me is, like you, it kind of forced me to go, okay, well, I'm going to hunt. So I got to figure this out. It actually made me a duck hunter, which I had never been in my life, because I started finding ponds and rivers on public land that the migrating ducks had no idea they were landing on public. Same thing with the woodcock. And so I'm like, this actually gave me a new hunting opportunity. And then you start figuring out the deer and going, man, you can work this to your advantage and have some really cool hunts that aren't your typical sitting on a farm in Iowa type of thing, but still give you the challenge and new challenges and the reward system that we all love in there. And so you just adapt. And I love hearing you talk about your experience that way, because what it says to me is you're somebody who is going to hunt regardless. And a lot of our listeners are like that.
Yeah. I mean, to me, there's nothing more fun in the world than putting an arrow through a mature animal and kind of like winning that chess game, right? So I think of it always as chess, and I'm making calculated moves everywhere I go, and so hunting in the suburbs, like to your point, it's a necessity for me. Like, I'm gonna hunt. I need to do that. I need that detachment from the real world and the kind of peaceful meditation that comes with sitting in a tree. it's funny that that peaceful meditation for me could be 30 feet off the highway where people are sitting in traffic, or in somebody's backyard where I'm using their Wi-Fi or whatever it might be. But kind of that peaceful calm that comes over you when you're hunting. And so, yeah, I mean, whether it's a quarter acre backyard or a 15-acre HOA piece or your chunk of public woods, that's all those are chessboards, and that chess match that goes on there is the most rewarding thing in the world. So I totally get where you're coming from. And, it's just fun and cool that what I thought, when I moved back from college, little background on me, I don't come from a hunting family at all. I was never exposed to hunting growing up. My mom's dad was a hunter, but he was also a smoker. And so by the time I was like 12, 13, he was not in good enough shape to where we could like go out in the woods and hunt, right? Because cigarettes are bad. So, he was a bow hunter early on. I learned how to shoot a bow. I loved shooting a bow. I loved being in the woods, but I never put two and two together that, hey, hunting these critters could be pretty sweet. So, when I was in college, I just had this wild hair that I wanted to learn how to hunt. And I went to school right on the West Virginia border for my undergrad. And it was just surrounded by farm country and ample big wood environments that I could go hunt in. And so I literally taught myself how to hunt. I'm super analytical. I'm really anal. I try to be very calculated just in everything that I do. It's just how my brain works. And so I would literally like stumble out into the woods and figure out like what was successful or what wasn't successful. I'd analyze it, and I'd go, okay, well, how can we prevent A, B, C from happening again that went wrong? And how can we increase our odds of having, X, Y, Z happen? And so I was just a sponge absorbing all this information, and I actually got pretty good at hunting in the 4 years that I was in the 14 years I was in college. And, so then, I came back to Northern Virginia where my family is, where my family business is. And like, I pretty much have to live here if I want to work with my family, which I love doing. So it was kind of like pigeonholed. And I remember thinking like, man, this sucks. Like here I am figuring out how to hunt, fall in love with bow hunting. And then, now I can't do it anywhere. And so, as things progressed and I started learning how to do the urban hunting, it's kind of funny that, I think if you're like truly into anything, you're going to figure out a way to do what you're passionate about. And it just happens that, I kind of made lemons out of lemonade, and it turns out my lemonade's really sweet because, I can hunt year round and shoot as many deer as the ones that walk in front of me, as long as they're antlerless. We have unlimited antlerless tags here. And so it ends up kind of being cool that, I went from thinking I was in this really bad situation, and it ended up being just the most amazing, perfect situation possible. Yeah. And so here I am.
Well, that's that point about the unlimited antlerless and just, making the most of these situations. When you look at the population trends that are going on and the growth in some cities and some of these states that were kind of flyover states that nobody really wanted to move to, and now you look at people moving there, what you're talking about, as unappealing as it is to probably a lot of hunters, it's going to be reality for a lot of hunters. And it's going to be reality for some of the hunters we're hoping to bring in, these adult onset hunters who are, seeing the value of wild game and seeing the value of being out wherever you can get out in the wild and not having the option to drive 4, 5, 6 hours to do it or more, or not having the motivation. And that, that idea that you can hunt that many days a year and get out there, or, never run out of tags. That's one thing that where I live in between the boundaries where we have unlimited antlerless tags too, because they want to get as many deer killed here as possible, because there's so many backyard deer that aren't getting hunted. And so it's like that's like a sweet little bonus. Like it makes up for some of the stuff you have to deal with being an urban hunter. Is
Yeah.
you're not running out of those tags, and if you can find the right spot, you're putting meat in the freezer, and that's a cool thing.
Yeah, and so just a little background, in our area, the carrying capacity is 12 to 15 deer per square mile, is what the browse in our area supports. We really don't have a ton of woods. I literally live like a 5-iron away from the White House. So anything that's developable is developed, right? And so it leaves you with these creek beds, floodplains, anything that's unable to be built on. So in that 12 to 15 deer per square mile, we've replaced like relatively not great hardwoods with lush landscaping, plantings, stuff that the deer are thriving on. And so the last time I was talking to our local wildlife biologist, they're unable to figure out how many deer are living in this area. When they do the deer density surveys, or they fly over with the helicopter with the thermals, it just looks like somebody kicked the anthill. And so their best guess is that it's in the 420 to 425 deer per square mile range. So like we are just inundated with deer. We have one of, if not the highest deer vehicle collision rates in the country. Surprisingly, the automobile insurance companies keep those relatively close to their vest, those numbers. I don't know why, but so we have a large problem here. We have a lot of Lyme's disease. We have a lot of other diseases that are being transmitted by the deer to people. There is literally nobody whose property I hunt on that either hasn't directly or 1 degree of separation had somebody in their family with Lyme's disease. It's everywhere here. We're starting to get chronic wasting disease in this area. I'd pretty much guarantee that it's already here. But the way that our DNR tests for that is they only test in areas that they like counties where it's already been. So it's like, well, hey, if you're not testing for it outside of those counties, you're not going to find it. They've started doing like small sample sizes, but I think it's relatively low probability that you're going to have one of those pop. But it's just a numbers game and just a waiting game for it to show up. But with all that said, and kind of back to what we touched on earlier with like the fact that deer are deer is like, there are a ton of deer here, but it's not like, oh, hey, let's just go sit on the porch and pop like 15 does, right? They're not dumb. Deer have evolved to learn that like we are predators and they are prey, and that they kind of have this little, I like to call it their bubble, but they have this safety bubble. And if you kind of cross into that bubble, like a Venn diagram almost, they know, and they react to their bubble being disturbed. And so just because we have a ton of deer, like you can go see 60 deer in the fall or in the winter when there are no leaves on the trees, but you're not shooting 5, 10, 15 deer. Like they don't just walk out like tame pets. And I get that all the time. They're like, oh, well, what you're doing is easy. It's like, no, man, like what I would argue it's harder, because for me, my playing field is that much smaller than a 2,500 acre chunk of public land. I mean, I enjoy going to large chunks of big wood public land because I can take a map and look at access points, look at where other people are going, and treat it like a giant version of the parks that I hunt here, right? And so when I'm looking at those, I can figure out where the pressure is, find where it isn't, you're going to find deer.
Yep.
Right. And we can get into that if you want also, kind of like what I look for when I'm looking at deer. But I've found it to be true from here to California and everywhere in between. The deer are pretty much the same.